Howdy, partners. We're officially halfway through the 2020s, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. As another year comes to a close, so does another year of going to the pictures.
Around the Dunnies.
You guys have a Denny's?
I'd honestly say this year wasn't quite as rich as 2023 in terms of big releases. You had quite a few big hitters last year. You had Oppenheimer, you had Barbie, you had Killers of the Flower Moon, you had Boy and the Heron, you had Godzilla Minus One sneaking up out of nowhere, and this year didn't really have me too excited, which is a shame. But that being said, it's also the most shit I've seen in terms of movies released from a single year. I probably spent a large portion of my money on stupid little fucking movie tickets this year.
One, please.
Spending $25 so I could see a CGI lizard fight a CGI monkey in a near-empty cinema. It kinda sucks. Boring! So let's just go into some of the year's honorable mentions. Special shoutouts to Longlegs, In a Violent Nature, A Real Pain, Kinds of Kindness, His Three Daughters, Ghostlight, Kingdom of the Planet of the Long Title, Oddity, How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies, and surprisingly, Wicked Part 1. I know, I'm as surprised as you. I also want to mention that there's a handful of releases that would definitely be making the list, but unfortunately due to the insanely awesome distribution of Australian theatres, I haven't been able to see everything I wanted to yet, such as the things you're currently seeing on the screen. Anyway, you don't give a shit, so let's just fucking talk about the things that I thought were pretty cool from this year. At 20 was Edward Berger's Conclave. At 19 was Mike Cheslick's Hundreds of Beavers. At 18 was Dev Patel's Monkey Man. At 17 was Pascal Plant's Red Rooms. At 16 was Rich Pepiot's Kneecap. At 15 was David and Nathan Zellner's Sasquatch Sunset. It was probably some of the best cinematography to come from this year, with a lot of surprisingly tense moments and an ending that felt more chilling than the final shot of The Zone of Interest. 14th is the infamous Megalopolis by the mastermind that is Francis Ford Coppola. I got to watch this about a yard away from Dr. George Miller himself, and we got to speak with him afterwards, and he seemed to enjoy it. It's a very bizarre project that you'll either hate or you'll appreciate. I thankfully fell into the latter category. When I spoke to George Miller after seeing Megalopolis, I asked what his thoughts were, and he said that it was definitely not boring. So who am I to disagree with him? 13th is going to Clint Eastwood's final film, Juror Number 2. Nicholas Hoult brings out the best performance of the year in this. On top of it all, it's very anxiety-inducing and is one of those movies that makes you question your own morals. I'm a sucker for a courtroom drama anyway, so it was always going to be good. At 12th was Vengeance Most Foul, the newest Wallace and Gromit movie. I had very low expectations going into this because Were-Rabbit is such a classic, but it feels like an extended version of The Wrong Trousers, and this movie just cements Gromit as one of fiction's best characters. And 11th is going to be given to the Australian indie thriller Bird Eater, directed by Jack Clark and Jim Weir. This has one of the strongest scores of the year, one of the best uses of colour, and in my opinion, the year's best supporting actor performance. For a feature debut from a couple of people from Sydney, this was a very impressive and tense piece about toxic masculinity and manipulation. If you haven't already, I highly recommend giving this a watch, or at least putting it on your watch list. So now that those fuckers are done, let's showcase what did actually manage to scrape the top 10. If you disagree, feel free to leave a comment. I'll read it. I promise. Memoir of a Snail is one of the most anticipated movies that I had coming into 2024. It comes from the Australian director Adam Elliott, who previously won an Oscar for his animated short film all the way back in 2008 called Harvey Crumpet. For those that don't know what it is, it's a stop-motion claymation about a man dealing with Tourette's. And I remember it knocking my probably 8-year-old ass on the floor when I watched it in school. So when I heard that he was making a 90-minute feature that took nearly a decade to make, I was completely in. It tells the story of Grace, who is separated from her twin brother Gilbert after her mother and father pass away, and they're sent to separate foster homes, where Grace is raised by neglectful foster parents, and Gilbert is raised by heavily religious parents, who shame him and bully him, and try to cast the devil out of him when he reveals that he's gay. It's a very weird movie. There's a lot of strange characters just dropped in throughout, but the best out of the bunch is probably Pinky, who plays an old woman that takes Grace under her wing and shows her that there's more to life than caring what people think. And she pushes Grace to come out of her her shell, because it's a movie about Snail, and to actually go out and enjoy life instead of wallowing in your own self-pity. I think the film portrays self-pity in a very real way. It doesn't hold back from getting really gross and showing the disgusting habits that people get into in that sort of way. The animation quality is probably the best to come from the year, just because of the little details that you can see in the background and with each of the characters. You can see the care and the craft put into each of the characters and all of the scenery. By the end of the movie, I was a fucking mess, and I was about to sob in this theater with about 6 other people, but my conscience took over and held me back from embarrassing myself in front of all these people. I'm really glad that this is getting the recognition that it deserves. Aaron Schimberg's A Different Man is a meta-comedy drama about a man who lives with neurofibromatosis. I think I pronounced that correctly, who dreams of becoming an actor who only gets cast in very minimal roles, and when he is actually cast in them, it is almost always something that has to do with his condition. But then one day a new tenant moves into his apartment complex next door, and he is immediately head over heels for this person and decides to undergo a surgery of some sort that is supposed to get rid of his condition. And what follows is a fucked up Cronenberg-esque simulation. Basically, think of that one episode of The Simpsons when Moe gets a facial reconstruction, except he turns into Sebastian Stan.
Oopsie, we got some leakage. Let me just cauterize that for you.
I had a really good experience watching this in the cinema. I managed to catch this at a film festival in Sydney, watching this with a shitload of other people that were laughing hysterically and equally freaking out and being disgusted by what they were seeing. I also really liked the performances in this. Sebastian Stan, I think, pulls out some of the best acting in his career, and Adam Pearson is a sneaker hit when it comes to a supporting actor in this year's supporting actor race. I guess he's both the movie's antagonist and also at the same time the protagonist, balancing a little bit of charisma, but it also seems two-faced if you see it from Sebastian Stan's perspective. Overall, it's a really good character drama with some really solid writing in this. I loved the screenplay, and I highly recommend giving this a watch if you were a fan of the substance, but you're looking for something a little bit less intense, we'll say. Sean Wang's Dee Dee felt like it was made for me, and I think a lot of people also felt that same connection. If you've seen the movie 8th Grade by Bo Burnham, this movie is very similar in the way that it presents its story. It's a lot of just things happening that the audience is supposed to connect with and sort of go, oh my fucking god, that happened to me, what the fuck? I thought I was the only one that threw a school chair across my art teacher's classroom one day and accidentally hitting a kid in the back of the head. You get what I'm trying to say. 8th Grade has a lot of moments like that speak to you, and I think Dee Dee does to a certain extent, but at the same time, it has a lot more of a linear story. The movie is about Dee Dee, who has a very weak connection with his family, who's embarrassed to be connected with his Taiwanese culture, and trying to be someone that he isn't, by hanging around certain crowds that he believes will accept him and make him cooler. And while this is all going on, he's constantly lashing out at his family, specifically his mum, who is trying her hardest to connect with her son, but he is just a brick wall and isn't letting her in. I think the real heart of Dee Dee lies within the mother character, who is perfectly portrayed by Joan Chen. She has the biggest struggle in the entire movie. Her children are very difficult for her to control, as well as that she's constantly put down by her mother-in-law, and her husband isn't in the picture because he's overseas supplying money and isn't really there to help her raise her children. She's such a brilliant character and brings the perfect amount of fresh air whenever Dee Dee does something that makes you question whether or not he is a good person. I think as the years go on, Dee Dee will be one of those movies that people will find and later appreciate. I Saw the TV Glow was very special to me. I'm not sure how well this connected with, for a lack of a better term, but normal people. I don't know. But this definitely struck a nerve, I think, with the right communities. I was speaking to some friends about this movie a few weeks ago, and they said that while they thought the movie was good, they didn't understand why it was portrayed as a horror movie. And I can understand what they mean. It has an eerie feel throughout the entire movie, and you can sense that something bad is going to happen, you just don't know what. A few years ago, I watched the director's debut, We're All Going to the World's Fair, and I was stunned by how pretty all of it looked, with its use of colours and its lo-fi look. It was very easy on the eyes, but for me it was a bit difficult to sit through. I didn't really know what to expect. So I think going into I Saw the TV Glow, also having already done my homework on the director's previous work, I kind of knew what to expect, and I was blown away by everything. Visually, this is the most stunning movie of the year. The neon colours are just immaculate, and the soundtrack is just as good. I think it's a bit of a crime that Justice Smith's performance in this isn't talked about as much as, say, Timothy Chalamet in that fucking Bob Dylan biopic or whatever the fuck. Because I think his tone of voice lends to the eeriness of this movie, and just the look on his face as though he doesn't know where he belongs in the world adds a lot to this movie. And this entire thing just reeks of old David Lynch works. There were a lot of moments in this that had me reminiscing on Blue Velvet. Dune Part 2 is the dictionary definition of IMAX viewing. With that being said, I actually didn't get to watch this in IMAX because every screening in my city was sold out, and the IMAX had only just been built, so every fucking person and their dog booked seats for this. So I had to settle for a VMAX screening, but it still lit a fire under my ass. The first time I saw Denis Villeneuve's Dune 2, it's gonna be an unforgettable experience. I mean, come the fuck on, bro. Paul Atreides jumps on the sandworm thing, and he rides it like it's fucking Bullseye in Toy Story 2. The thumping sound effects echoing throughout the cinema, like, bro, I was fucking in awe by what I was watching. The VFX in this movie are the best to come from any recent blockbuster movie, at least as far as my memory is concerned. I really cannot think of anything that has reached this level of spectacle, at least in recent years, especially with the declining quality when it comes to VFX in such movies as, you know, your Marvel movies. It's crazy to think that this and Deadpool 3 came out in the exact same year, and the difference in quality is just insulting to Bald Man Feige. He needs to sort his shit out.
Come on! I blew it.
Dune 2 takes the very patient build-up that it made in the first part and immediately throws you into a battle in the opening minutes of its sequel, and it does not stop on the brakes at all. It just keeps on building on that momentum, and the expert craftsmanship that Denis brings to the table has definitely put him in high regard as one of Hollywood's top directors. Challenges was my number one on the list for quite some time, until a few cheeky fuckers came out of nowhere and knocked it down the totem pole, unfortunately. But I will say, this might be one of the most immersive movies of the year. I mean, I could smell the sweat coming off the screen. I'm not usually a big Luca Guadagnino fan. I've really only seen Call Me By Your Name, about 25 minutes of Bones and All, and now Challenges. But man, there was so much flavor packed into this. The adrenaline I felt when I saw this for the first time in the cinema had me absolutely gassed. My sphincter was tight anytime we cut back to the present day tennis match, or anytime we really cut back to a tennis match in general, to be honest. The power that the three leads had on me was fucking insane, and it doesn't really help that they're three of the sexiest actors working in Hollywood right now. It's a cheat code. Those POV shots during the ending tennis match was unreal, and it was just as intense as the score. I honestly never expected to enjoy this as much as I did. I saw the trailer, and I really thought nothing of it, but I'm so glad I watched this. I nearly went and saw The Fall Guy instead of going and seeing this. It took me about 3 separate viewings to finally appreciate how much of a heater Furiosa is. I'm not 100% on my feelings right now, but I wouldn't be surprised if, on a few more rewatches, I prefer this to Fury Road. We properly get to dive into this crazy post-apocalyptic world that George Miller put together, learning about new factions and towns, and I still feel like there's so much more for Dr. George to play with in this sandbox. Furiosa contains some phenomenal performances, and a lot more in the ways of world building when compared to Fury Road. You can make the argument for less iconic shots and moments, but I had a lot more fun seeing this story unfold. And hot take, the Octopus sequence in Furiosa, it might be better than the chase scene in Fury Road. Okay, I'm not trying to fucking start any shit, I'm just spreading my opinion. I mean, George Miller is almost fucking 80 years old and he's still pulling off shots like this. It's a crime that he's not even considered for the conversation of Best Director this year. Same goes for both Chris Hemsworth and Anya Taylor-Joy. They are so good. I think we can all agree that Chris Hemsworth puts on his career best in this movie, but I've not seen much discussion in regards to Anya Taylor-Joy. I mean, I argue she had a lot less to work with, but managed to stay on the exact same level, acting in a 2.5-hour epic through purely body language. For me, this is definitely one of the best to come from the year. There's high-octane chase scenes, there's the goofy as fuck background characters, and the year's best in terms of stunts by not even a fucking long shot. I know The Beast is technically a 2023 release with festivals and all that stuff, but theatrically worldwide it was released in 2024, and hopefully it does contend for awards season, because this was really, really fucking good. I know I've brought the dude up already, but this just stinks of David Lynch, with its sci-fi plot device, AI taking over 70% of the jobs by 2044, and anyone that hasn't submitted themselves to what's called a purification process. Once you purify yourself in this world, you have to take injections and live out your past lives to rid yourself of any strong emotions or attachments to people or love. You have to become a shell of a person, just like I did when I heard that Robert Downey Jr. was coming back to the MCU as Dr. Dune. At the start I was a little bit bamboozled by the movie because I didn't really understand what was going on. It just drops you in the 19th century, then all of a sudden you're jumping forward a century and you're in 2044. But after I just let it slide and I let the movie take the wheel, I was fully immersed in this world and I loved it. Léa Seydoux, holy shit, what a performance she gave. She was such a strong lead. I've seen her in a few roles here and there before, but never before in the spotlight. She blew me away with her subtle glances off to the side and then her looks of fear and anguish during those scenes, if you know what I'm talking about. She gave it her all, and I've got to applaud her for it. She was such a good talent. George McKay was good, but didn't blow me away as much as Léa Seydoux, but he shines when he wants to, I guess. The storyline set in 2014 was a little bit weaker than what was set in the 1800s, but the highs in the 2014 setting were much higher with the tension that it brought to the table. Overall, it stuck with me for months after I watched it, so anyone that hasn't seen it, I implore you to give it a watch. And now we come to the year's funniest movie, but also the most devastating. Sean Baker is a filmmaker that has been severely slept on for quite some time, in my opinion. A lot of people probably know him as that one guy who did the Florida Project. But in my opinion, he's one of the best writers, directors, and casting directors that are working right now. He knows exactly the sort of people he's looking for when it comes to his works, and Anora is probably his most easily accessible for a mainstream audience. The first half is purely Cinderella story between Anora as she finds herself involved with a 21-year-old Russian boy who lives in a gigantic mansion, and we're immediately swept away into this enchanting love story, all for it to immediately cave in on itself at around the midpoint. Everything that follows is the classic batshit insane characters that you'd find in an average Sean Baker movie like Tangerine or Red Rocket. I think the best part of Anora is the character actors. There's not a single character in this that is forgettable. Each person has a moment to shine. Anora is ultimately the heart of the movie and the person you root for the most, but I really fell in love with Igor, and I love to hate the stupid fucking brothers Taurus and Garnick. They were so fucking funny. It was just classic slapstick humor. Everyone is deserving of praise, and it feels like a bit of a disservice to not pluck out each individual person and give them praises, but there's just so much to love about this movie. This will make you laugh and it will make you cry, man. I just love Sean Baker, dude. He's so good. When I think of body horror, there's only a few that immediately come to mind. The top one was The Fly, followed closely behind by Titan, but for me, The Substance is now a leading contender. This was such a good ride to go on. It felt like a never-ending roller coaster. It had me squirming in my seat, near vomiting on multiple occasions, and I don't like the guy, but Dennis Quaid slipped into this role like a cheap pair of slippers. I don't think you could have put a more fitting actor in this role. Demi Moore is such a good talent to watch on the screen, and she shows such an impressive range as she goes from a depressed, washed-up has-been to a literal fucking gremlin. I should probably clarify as well, I don't think the themes in The Substance are necessarily all that strong, but it's not so much about what it's saying, but how it says it, it's just so ridiculous. Every time I thought it had gone as far as it could possibly go, it just kept on exceeding itself. A notable moment was when, spoiler warning, but when Monstro Elizasu is born, I guess is how to put it, or made. I thought maybe that would be where the movie ends. But then this little gag has its own story for probably about 15 minutes, and I couldn't believe it. It just kept on fucking going. It was so funny. When the little title card came up, I was like, oh, what? Okay, I guess we're having another emotional journey here, and it had me locked in. And that's it. Those are the top movies of the year. If you want to know what the worst movies are of the year, in my opinion, I'll quickly list them off. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, Trigger Warning, Madam Web, Tarot, and Borderlands. Those last two movies are shit. Honorable mention, Red 1. That movie also fucking sucks. But yeah, that's it. Those are the good and the bad that came from this year. If you're interested in seeing the whole list for whatever reason, it's down in the description. You can check it out. Hopefully 2025 brings some really good stuff for us. Hopefully we don't get a Mufasa 2, but if we do, I'm sure that nobody will go and see it.